Clad in his usual garb of coarse linen, barefoot despite the cool weather, he listened silently to the envoys from Zaragoza. The nobles in velvet informed him that he, Ramiro, a monk of the monastery of San Pedro, was now to be the new ruler of Aragon. Ramiro was not prepared for such a turn of fate, but he had no right to resist, for he was the only direct heir of the late King Sancho. He was the fourth son of the ruling Aragonese sovereign Sancho I and his much-loved second wife Felicia de Rusi. All his life Sancho fought primarily against the Moors and died also, on the battlefield, from an arrow in his neck. Ramiro was only 8 years old at the time, but he already knew that he did not want a similar fate for himself. Military campaigns, land grabs, conflicts with neighbors. All the things that the kings of the 11th century did were not interesting to the quiet, thoughtful boy. But it was common sense that guided him most of all. What ambition could he have with 3 healthy brothers? Becoming a widow, Felicia contented herself with the title of countess and retired to Barcelona. The younger children went with her. And what could they do in the capital, where their half-brother Pedro, the son of Sancho from his first marriage, sat on the throne? The difference in age between the older and younger brothers was almost 20 years. But Ramiro listened with interest to the news about the new ruler of Aragon, which his mother read out when she received letters from friends. Pedro had successfully besieged Huesca, where their common father had died. Pedro had won one victory after another. Expanding the borders of the kingdom, he had driven the Moors. But, alas, fortune changed him one day. The king died in the year 1104, leaving no sons. Barcelona didn't know whether to rejoice or grieve. Now Felicia's son Alfonso was to be king. In truth, he was only the king's third son, but his older half-brother had died by this time. So the Aragonese crown went to him. And what about Ramiro? After congratulating his brother, he retired to the monastery. Behind the thick walls of San Ponce de Tomares, he felt much more comfortable than in the royal palace. Alfonso, however, did not have to spend too much time on secular duties. Like his father and brother, he threw himself into battle to drive the Moors as far away from the borders of the kingdom as possible. It was thanks to this king that ancient Zaragoza finally came under Christian control, and Alfonso was nicknamed the Warrior, and is still honored as one of the most successful military leaders of the Middle Ages. From his monastery, Ramiro was pleased to learn that his brother's first order of business was to rebuild Zaragoza's ruined monasteries and churches. These Christian shrines had fallen into total disrepair during the 400 years of Muslim rule. The city was revitalized, and the families of those who had left it 200, 300 years earlier began to return. But Alfonso, a successful warrior, was not happily married. He married the Castilian queen Urraca, wishing to unite the two states, but the young woman strongly opposed this prospect. A divorce ensued, and Alfonso found himself ruling without a wife and without a son. The warrior king died of a wound treacherously inflicted in the early part of September in the year 1134. He was attacked while inspecting a frontier fortress and died of his wounds on the 7th of the same month. And when the nobles opened the will of the king, it turned out that Alfonso Warrior intends to leave the kingdom, 2 monastic orders. Of course, no one could think of fulfilling such a will, especially in a situation where the king had a brother alive and well. Ramiro, a monk, they sent for him. Ramiro had no desire to play the role of king. Besides, he was bound by monastic vows. For a man of the Middle Ages, vows were not an empty word. In such a situation, only the Pope could decide the fate of Aragon. And he, having listened to the pleas of the Aragonese nobles, decided to release Ramiro from his vows so that he could begin to fulfill his new royal role. Thus, Ramiro II was crowned. But the king needed a successor, so Ramiro had to marry. The choice was so unusual that many of the king's entourage initially disapproved. Agnès de Poitiers, a widow with 3 children. The former monk calmly explained to the nobles, "A young woman who already has children is more likely to have another child. You can marry a young beauty, but whether she will produce offspring is unknown. Many nobles underestimated King Ramiro. Knowing about his past in the cloister, they imagined that the ruler of Aragon became a weak-willed and soft-hearted man, so they easily began to make plans to seize power. When the king learned of this, he decided to consult with the abbot of the monastery where he had taken his tonsure. There is a legend that when the envoys came to him with a question, the Holy Father was engaged in pruning roses, and he advised his recent ward to do the same to his enemies. Ramiro fulfilled the abbot's wish, and 12 representatives of noble families involved in the conspiracy lost their heads. Ramiro was not mistaken in his choice of bride. Agnes became pregnant and gave birth to the pretty Princess Petronilla, heir to the throne, and the king, who had been waiting for this very hour, abdicated in favor of his daughter. He had calculated everything. He chose in advance a future husband for Petronilla. It was the Count of Barcelona, a man from a family he knew well. He drew up a contract with him, stipulating all the details, and then he retired to his abode. Ramiro II, the monk king, lived another 20 years. Petronilla did marry the Count of Barcelona and once wore the crown of Aragon. She bore 5 children, one of whom became King of Aragon, and her daughter Dulce became Queen of Portugal. But that is another story altogether.